It's funny because I never really thought too deeply about where it would go. I would just kind of, in a weird way, just trusted something would, happen. It's kind of surreal. I keep trying to say to myself, like, the work's the reward, the work's the reward, Getting your name in the paper isn't the point. Fueling my sort of obsessions, I guess, is what I'm after, so. I kind of like to, over the space of a few years, focus in on something, then sort of work that through, and then I'll take a few steps back and see what sort of jumps out at me. It sort of depends on what's really sort of prevalent at the time, but it's also really, I like to look at things that have a lasting impact. I kind of have a 30-year rule when it comes to making paintings and putting subject into paintings. Like something like Coca-Cola is a great topic because that's got pretty deep roots in American culture, but like the example I've been using is I wouldn't do a painting of the Spice Girls because nobody would know who that was, in a year or something. That would really ephemeral pop culture isn't something I want to tackle. So I'm looking specifically, like sort of the biggies, General Motors, and right now I'm really looking closely at car advertising. And I mean, cars is what represents American culture better than the car. So I try to find the invisible corporate symbol, like the car that nobody thinks about, or McDonald's that nobody thinks is sort of culturally important, and look at that. So I guess I like advertising because it's where if you'll, excuse the sort of the pun, it's where the rubber meets the road. It's where that's the interface. That's the interface that corporations want between them and you. That's where the interaction's going on, and everything beyond that, they don't want you to know. I'm pretty sure. I'm sure if you called them up and sort of asked them tough questions, they're not going to be very helpful with you. Everybody sees a commercial on TV. Everybody sees a magazine or a billboard ad. Not a lot of people will go into the library or call up, the Better Business Bureau and find out what the corporation's doing. And obviously they're doing things that affect us that we're not aware of. But I don't know, I'm not really comfortable with being sort of a crusader and kind of blowing the lid off things. That's really other people's. That's not my job. I like to sort of, when I'm painting, I like to think I'm looking out at the world and sort of looking at the surfaces of everything. Like what is it that all of us in the public sphere share? Some art is about the internal struggle of, the human self, or personal relationships with, at home, and the domestic kind of thing. And I guess what's hidden isn't what appeals to me, it's what's on the surface, and then the viewers hopefully themselves will be able to dive under that. And I guess it's just cheating in a way, because you're connecting with the audience better that way, because you're looking at the forest and the trees rather than sort of what's under the soil. So I'm sure corporations have seen some of my work. A few actually bought it. Subway, British Columbia, the president of Subway BC bought one of the paintings that I had in my body of work in 1997, Royal Treats. And I know my dealer has approached, McDonald's and that kind of thing in the past to get them to buy, and more often than not, they're kind of ambivalent. They just sort of say, don't bother us with all that. So, hopefully there's some kind of freedom of speech, still. Canada has a similar Bill of Rights to the United States, that offers certain protections, so hopefully those would, I'd think as an artist I'd be covered, and it's not something I would welcome, I don't think, Maybe if you were kind of wanted a quick and easy path to fame, maybe getting sued and sort of getting your name in the paper might be you'd think that would be a great idea, but I'm sure, corporate lawyers with millions of dollars is not the kind of people I want to have on my bad side, so. Doing a painting for a corporation, that would have to be something I would have to actually, I'd have to actually face. I think it would depend on a lot of things. It would depend on the way they asked and sort of the people that I dealt with, and obviously the company or the corporation that was asking. Yeah, I honestly couldn't tell you what I would do unless it, obviously if they offered me an insane amount of money, you'd sort of have to think about it, but compromise yourself in the short term for freedom in the long term, that's, in many ways that's a, religious question, do you do the deal with the devil to be that genius guitar player for the rest of your life and then sort of sell your soul? So, yeah, I'll have to get back to you on that one. I guess it's the power of painting and over photography. And that's not to diminish photography, because obviously there's geniuses who work in that medium who have the same impact as paintings, but in that way. I think the one thing I like about painting over photography is first, scale. I mean, you can work on a large scale in photography, but it presents its challenges, and you've got no res with photography. You don't have to worry about grain. Even with the finest grain film and the finest papers, you're still dealing. You're getting down to a point. If you look close enough, you've got dots. You've got a break in the continuity. The quality of the oil paint too has a luminous quality that like I say, the best photographers can get close to that, but I mean, just the physical surface and the colors of a painting are stronger than anything you'll be able to achieve in photography. And again, I don't want to be misconstrued in saying that I think photography is weak, because that's not true. I guess it's all about presence. Like in the best paintings are something that you stand in front of and you feel a palpable air. There's just something about them that just is kind of flying off these handmade objects, and the process I enjoy. And even as powerful as Photoshop is, there's limits to that. So there's certain things that, that I can fake a lot. I can just sort of fudge in the photographic side of things, and then when I get to the painting, it's all nice and neat and crisp and finished, and hopefully my imagination can take over where, I can't get the right props or the right sort of set pieces or the right clothing. There's a lot more freedoms with paint over Photoshop, So, and it's finally using all that technology to get to the point of preparation of the painting, and then just tossing it away. And now you're really working with your hands, and you're really, in a human way, connected with, the plastic world, rather than just sort of sitting in front of a computer monitor and having your eyeballs burn out. Like I was saying, using photography to do paintings, that's something I've run into a lot of people sort of prejudiced against, the idea of the artist as creative genius who just sort of stands in a room and creates, turns on this creative tap and all this stuff just comes out. And I've just finished reading a brand new book by the artist David Hockney called Secret Knowledge: Lost Techniques of the Old Masters. And it's his thesis that artists, since the Renaissance, right about 1430 specifically, started using optics in creating their paintings, mirrors to do reflections in camera obscuras, and then eventually getting into the late 19th century using photography as a basis for painting, which is really kind of an unknown sort of history in art. And part of Hockney's book stated that artists at the very first, in the Renaissance, one of the very first optic methods that they used was a concave mirror, that they would sit in a darkened room, and they'd have a window to the outside, and they would sit their figure outside. And they'd take this convex mirror, and it would act like a parabolic reflector, like you'd find in a refracting telescope, and they'd point it at this, this bishop or whomever, guy sitting outside this really, about the window on a sunny day. They'd point it at him, and they'd turn it slightly to the wall, and it would cast a reflection. Just naturally, this mirror would make an image reflected on the wall. And anyway, so I'm staying in this little cabin at the Frickmans, and they had a shaving mirror on the counter, and I just thought, oh, well, what the hell, I'll give this a try. So I pulled up the shade and turned the light off and stood back and held that mirror to the window and turned it, and there was the back of the Frickmans' house on the wall in the cabin, which floored me, because I had no idea. I'd never heard of that in my life. And it really, this was this incredible demonstration to me of how artists, would use those technologies. And I can't see how having that, you could, if you knew that, how could you ignore it? It certainly gave me a lot more confidence. Reading his book and doing that sort of impromptu experiment has really opened my eyes. Just that in the last few weeks, a lot of my paradigms have shifted as to how artists work. And certainly artists in the past, if they were professionals and they had deadlines, certainly they're going to use any means at their disposal to not cut corners, but to make their job easier. And it's something I think that's a pretty vital tool and pretty misunderstood, actually. So painting obviously seems to be focused on beauty as one of its primary functions. And I know that's something that I don't try to consciously build into something. Like I sort of have a few rules when it comes to composing paintings, and what is, like, I never use chiaroscuro lighting. Like, I never want to kind of use I want to stay away from those, not necessarily cliches, but what's expected of you in a painting. So I'll never do that. And I'll try to stay away from using kind of dramatic draperies if they don't fit in, because that's sort of another traditional idea of beauty in a painting, sort of big, huge, velvet drapes or something that you see a lot in the back of Renaissance and later Western painting. I try not to dress people up in fancy clothes, like the idea of somebody in a beautiful frock dress or something seems kind of forced. But I like the idea of taking the dull and doing your best to kind of make that look beautiful. Like there's something more beautiful about some guy getting crowned in his McDonald's uniform with a paper crown than the real thing. It has I guess therein is the challenge to give those dull things beauty, I suppose. But it's never the prime motivator for me in making an image. Hopefully if you love this subject enough, the beauty will come through in that. And I know that the people I paint, my friends, they're at the core of a lot of what I do. And I mean, when you have friends, you enjoy being around them, and just the human animal has a certain beauty to it, too. So again, when it comes to beauty, I hope to let the natural beauty work its own way in, rather than kind of be placed there by me. So if you're painting your friends, you're going to have to be kind to them to some degree, You're going to have to cut a few double chins out here and sort of fill in some hair. I mean, like a lot of people pointed out to me, every time I paint myself with hair, and it's true. So, especially now, it certainly is part of the idea that advertising streamlines and cleans things up and, airbrushes everybody to perfection. So, yeah, that's something I am very conscious of. I always say to people, if they're scared about posing, that plastic surgery comes at no extra charge. So, yeah. I think that's an important part that I've kind of maybe ignored sort of conceptually, but you just kind of do naturally, and it's one thing that sort of crept up on me in a way. So, yeah, I mean, idealism in painting certainly has a grand history, and in some things I try not to do that. I know with the people, I'll certainly try to be as flattering to them as possible. But when it comes to sort of things in the environment, I mean, if they'll fit sort of compositionally, I'll try to leave them in. I know Richard DeVorbe was pointing out in one of the paintings yesterday this kind of empty planter in the background that was just full of soil, and it was kind of ugly, and so, but it didn't really seem to sort of clash with what was going on. So I'll do a little bit of editing sort of for clarity and cleaning things up, but on the other hand, try to rely on the natural things happening. Like if I don't have people dressed in costume, I'll just try to let them wear their own clothes, whatever they show up in. I just tell them not to wear any plaid or sort of paisley and stuff that really takes a long time to paint. So, but other than that, I'll try to just let them be themselves and hope that comes through as well. So it's a nice balance between, sort of totally faking it and letting some of the reality come through. So, like I say, I'm a lover of historical art and paintings and sort of the grandiose and bombastic attempts at